All right. Hello, everybody. This is my live stream on how libertarians are going to have to save the world. And this is kind of a result of the election that just transpired in California. And it's not just California. I feel like this is a systemic problem. And I think we need to be a little more honest with ourselves about what's going on. Here is the District 49. This is the one that I was advocating Danielle win. And here what we have, all the people at the top are Democrats and Republicans. And then we have the first independent. And then Danielle, the Libertarian, Danielle was Green Party, the Libertarian, and then the Peace and Freedom Party. I love Jordan Mills, he's awesome. And you can see that they're not even close to getting the numbers that we need. And if they went to all the political events and whatnot, but most of the people that you need to reach are people aren't even interested in politics. Like there's 30,000 people that voted for someone I've never heard of. And what is this, 60,000-ish on the top group here. And we went to some forums and whatnot, there's only a few people there. It's like Danielle and Jordan could have rocked it at the forum, and I think they did great. But yet, just because of the names and the fundraising, that's what our election results are. Same thing here. We have District 39. This guy, Steve Cox, the guy I know on Twitter, and he's very active. He talks to a lot of people. He's doing what needs to be done. He's engaging in difficult conversations. And he was running as an independent. He was a Bernie guy. And he got beat by Karen, someone who I've never heard of. And I went to Twitter. She doesn't hardly tweet. She doesn't have any following. And yet she did better than him. Which to me also shows that social media is just not cutting it in terms of if you're going to run for office, how are you going to get in touch with enough people who are pretty much disinterested in politics? That's the problem. You're trying to get people to vote for you who are not interested in politics. And that right there is a problem. And of the solutions, pretty much the people who think government can work are listed here. And this isn't really an exact breakdown. You could break down the left any way you want. I just threw it Democrats, progressives, socialists. You could do Green Party. You could do Bernie-crats and people who former Bernie and don't really trust him anymore. The left is so fractured. But that's the general group that thinks government can work. They think that government is the one that's going to have to, not necessarily, I don't want to make it seem like they're taking your tax dollars and spending it on other people. That's kind of a conservative and libertarian line. But at the end of the day, it's the government's job to administer capitalism such that we don't have massive wealth disparity. And where capitalism fails, we want government to pick up the slack. And that's this group of people, Democrats, progressives, and socialists. And I'm one of them. I'm absolutely a progressive. I wouldn't call myself a Democrat or a socialist anymore because I don't think government can work. But I am a progressive. I do view the world through my heart. And I think that's what makes people progressive. Now, the Republicans have another solution that's generally, honestly, I don't think they're going to like me calling this, but it's kind of Democrat light. Or maybe the Democrats are Republican like. They still think we need a lot of government in order to solve these problems, certainly defense and whatnot. But they still think that government can handle capitalism. Then there's the Republicans and the group of people that just don't give a fuck. Oh, excuse me, the Libertarians and the group of people who don't give a fuck. And this is generally the voting group. This is the groups that we have to deal with. And the Greens definitely are up in this group of thinking government can work. And what I found with the left, and it was absolutely when I went to the Democratic Club meetings, and even worse with the Green Party meeting, but also online, and this is consistently online on Facebook and Twitter and whatnot. Democrats, or the left, when you argue with us, we're trying to make the other person feel what we feel so that they morally want to make the same choice we do. And when you disagree with someone on the left, it feels like your heart isn't in the right place. And it doesn't necessarily come from a place of logic and reason. You just know in your heart that it is morally unacceptable. And when you challenge those on the left, like right now, if you're a Democrat, the Republicans are the worst thing in the world, and anyone who's not helping you fight the Republicans might as well be a Republican, because that's what you feel. And it's hard to get anyone on the left to take a step back and say, I know this is how you feel, but what you're doing isn't working. I mean, really, if you're going to solve the problem, the people who don't give a fuck, they're not going to help you fix government, right? They're the ones that they're going to show up and vote maybe, but you better give them someone to vote for. And you can judge them all you want for not doing their civic duty or whatever, but the reality is they're there, they're not going away, and that's how people behave. So there's a large group of people who just don't give a fuck, or they're willing to follow the lead because they know they don't have it in them to make the change. Maybe a lie, maybe true, but they're there. The Republicans certainly don't think government's going to work. So they're not going to be the ones that fix government. And Libertarians certainly don't think government's going to be the one that fixes it. So they're not going to be the ones. So what we're left is with the group of Democrats, progressives, and socialists. And I got to say, this group is not doing a good job of talking to each other at all. This is my tribe, the people on the left. The people who are still supporting Hillary, or still supporting the Democrats, or the blue wave, the blue no matter who, they are absolutely shutting all communication off. They're literally boasting about it on Twitter, about blocking everyone who's not blue no matter who. Like, this is not good. These are the people who want government to work, yet they can't talk to each other. So that's the Democrats. And then there's people in the Green Party who say, well, look, at the Democrats are failing. You might as well come to us. Well, that's the same mentality that the Democrats have against the Republicans. Like, well, have you seen the Republicans? Look how bad they are. No, and this isn't a shot against Green Party people or the Green Party. It's just acknowledging how people behave. And when we went into, I went into a lot of Democratic clubs, and I tried to throw out new ideas, and they just not listen. They're just not into it. They want to do the same thing that they've done before, and they want it to be successful. They just want to canvass harder or do whatever it is that they need to do. And the Green Party, my experience, and Danielle St. John had the same experience, is that you can never be holy enough for them. You can never be good enough for them, and your plan is always going to leave someone behind, and your heart sucks. That's the message you get when you go to a Green Party and try and change it. Danielle and I were there, and Justin was there, and we were looking for an endorsement. We're talking about our plan of the cooperative economy. And I got about 15 seconds the way through the explanation, maybe a little more, and I got cut off with someone saying, well, you're not addressing poverty, you're not doing this correctly. You don't give a fuck about the poor people. I'm like, my plan addresses poverty in 2 years. And I can't even get through it because you feel like I'm a bad person because I'm disagreeing with your heart in some way. And I think this is a bad way to move forward, because we're not hearing each other. We're not working with each other. We're judging each other. And this was the same thing with people who still believe Bernie and the people who don't believe Bernie, but they were former Bernie-crats. That was probably in my group. There's a lot of people who think Bernie should have spoke out a little more forcefully against drones and spoke out a little more forcefully against election fraud. And I think that's a valid concern. Those are things that we absolutely should be talking about. But a lot of people think that Bernie's their only hope. So, of course, bashing Bernie at this point, it's like, well, why would you do that? Because you're just going to let Trump win or something like that. And honestly, I think Trump is going to win. Why? Because this group here on the left, Democrats, Progressives, Socialists, Greens, whatever, we can't talk to each other. And we can't get our shit together. I just got a message this morning from some of these MMT people who just can't shut up about MMT. And I'm like, look, I'm not disagreeing necessarily with the concept of MMT. My question to you is, how likely are you going to get enough people in office to do this in a way that's going to actually get wealth to the people? And the answer is you're probably not. The same thing with single payer. So it's just a matter of being realistic about what we can achieve through government. So how can libertarians save the world? Yeah, do say more about the election fraud. It's awful. It's awful. I will say more about election fraud for sure. How can libertarians save the world? Now, I'm not advocating at all that we be like libertarians. Like this guy, this is the libertarian chair in 2016 at the convention, dropped trowel to make people like get excited or something. It was weird. Like I went to the Libertarian convention in San Diego, and I admit the mood was a little low, but I wasn't anywhere near to do what this guy was doing. I watched the video this morning. It was about as entertaining as it looked. So I'm not saying that everyone needs to grow a beard and become like libertarians. But I will say this about the libertarians in my run for Congress. They were the only group that listened. They were the only group that listened. I had some conservatives, individuals listen. I went to the Republican convention and I talked about Black Lives Matter with some conservatives. And once I heard about how they don't like what George Soros is funding, and it's true, George Soros does fund a lot of stuff, not at the lower level, but at the high level, he does, I think, do a lot of negative things. It's, God forbid, someone with money try and make more money off division. So once you get through that, they're like, well, how can you possibly support Black Lives Matter? They're attacking the police, blah, 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 blah. He wasn't the chair. I forgot who he was. Thanks, Hap. They're like, how can you possibly support Black Lives Matter because they're against the police? And I explained to him, I'm like, well, for a lot of people, they feel like black lives have not mattered. And it's as simple as that. And you don't have to be anti-police to be pro-human life, pro-Black Lives Matter. And he's like, wow. I mean, it took a little longer than that. He's like, wow, thank you. And so he listened. He's like, yeah, my side never mentions that. I'm like, no, they don't. Of course not. There's no division in it. But the libertarians listen. I went to the, I don't know, it was the head of the Libertarian San Diego party, and we had a bunch of people, and they all stroked their beards, except for the woman who didn't have a beard. And they all listened to my plan, and then we went back and forth, and we talked about how much they love markets, and they were honest to God curious about it. They didn't like a lot of the cooperative economy idea because they're still in that Ayn Rand mindset where they're going to take over the world by controlling all the resources, and that's going to be great for everyone. But they are spot on about their markets because they don't trust government, and they know they don't trust. They're open about it, and they say that effectively the government can't intercede, but two people individually can exchange things. And I think they're onto something there, because you really don't want someone else forcing your individual decision with someone else. Like George Carlin, this is one of my favorite quotes of George Carlin. He says, selling's legal, fucking is legal. Why isn't selling fucking legal? And he's got a point. If two people want to engage in a transaction, they should be able to. And why would you make prostitution illegal? Well, in capitalism, that's because a lot of women would be oppressed if we had prostitution. But technically, should two adults be able to pay for each other to do whatever they want? Yeah, they should. Now, my solution was, as many of you know, the cooperative economy, and that's effectively what they have, the libertarians have, plus open sourcing. Let me get into that. So the free market, people like it because the government cannot address peace and poverty. I'm going back to this group, Democrats, progressives, socialists, Greens, whatever. This is my tribe. I'm not trying to rip on them. But we're not getting it together. Like, if we want to control and influence government, we have to have some sort of plan and united front. And the Democrats aren't even interested in progressive change. That's the crazy part. So, going back to here. So the free market is the libertarian solution because they don't believe government can address peace and poverty. And I don't think the free market can either, because that's like letting the rich run amok. If there's nearly no rules, what's going to stop them? And I don't think government can, because of what we just talked about. So my solution is open sourcing. And when you open source the free market, you are effectively giving away anything you've learned, your intellectual property, and you are subjecting yourself to the natural social pressures of whether or not what you're doing is right. You don't need a law to say that you can't build a nuclear weapon in your garage, because if you are open sourcing your project and people see that you're building nuclear weapons next door, they're not going to be okay with that. So that open sourcing addresses a few things, and I think that's the missing piece that the libertarians don't advocate. It's that sharing aspect of it. So what do I think we should do? We need to listen to the libertarians. Not because they necessarily have something to teach us, even though they do, but we need to listen to them so that we can establish trust, so that we can say, okay, I see what you're talking about the free market. I see what you're talking about government. I see you. I may not completely agree, but I see that's how you view the world. And if that's how you view the world, I have a suggestion. Because right now the libertarians aren't getting it done either. The Green Party isn't getting, none of the parties are getting it done. But if we, Will says, happy you're gonna, not you, I'm not listening to you, Will. I've listened to you long, just kidding, bud. But if we engage with the libertarians who, like I said, they were the only ones on this campaign trail with me who were willing to listen. And it was at one of the libertarian conventions, I was going back and forth and arguing with a few people, and one of them said, you know what? Why aren't we already doing this? To me, to the open source. He's like, I get it. Why aren't we already doing this? I'm like, yes. I was like, I'm going to do well in this campaign. This was early on. I was like, I'm going to do well in this campaign because, hey, you know, the people are listening and they're interested and they're sick of the BS, and Trump has scared enough of them into actually talking to people. So, but that wasn't the case because people still aren't talking to each other. And unlike the libertarians, it seems like no one is listening. So I propose that we go and engage with the libertarians. I don't think they have it right because they don't have this open source piece. But they do have the freedom piece right, and they do have the market piece right. And if we just add a little bit of that green progressive heart to the libertarian solution, that is, we don't need anyone to, it doesn't have to be compulsory, we don't need the government to tell us what to do. We can just say, hey, what? If you're going to run as a libertarian platform, add this open source piece to it. And we may not even necessarily have to run, because if the Libertarian Party takes this and runs with this concept, we don't need to turn to government to solve our problems. That's the beauty of it. Like, it's ironic that the libertarians have to run for office in order to say we don't need government. What we really need is a solution to show up or be created where we don't need government. And then we could slowly over time decrease our dependence on capitalism and government and increase our dependence on this open source free market. And then, once we have something, the people who normally don't give a fuck will actually start giving a fuck because they have something to vote for. Like, if you go back, I don't know how many people are in this district, but I guarantee it's a lot more than this who voted. I don't know if this one has doesn't have the percentage there. Maybe this one does. Anyway, a lot of people don't vote because they know it's crap. They know that they're not going to get anything out of the Democrats or the Republicans, and they know that the Green Party's not going to win, most likely, and they know that the Libertarians and the Peace and Freedom are not going to win. So they don't give a fuck, and they're kind of right. But if we have a solution that actually can work, that actually combines the left and the right, I think we're going to be a lot better off. That's how I think the Libertarians can save the world. I think the biggest piece now is that this group, my tribe, not so much Democrats. I've been unable to communicate with them. I mean, like the national ones, not the local level, but the national ones. They're just so hell bent on Trump and Republicans bad, and there's nothing else that they're willing to look at. But if you are sick of getting your vote either not counted, having to fight for your vote, having to canvass just to get a few signatures to turn into your representative and they're just going to ignore it, if you're sick of waiting every 2 years to try and have your voice heard, if you're unsure that maybe Bernie's really going to pull it off, I don't think Bernie's going to win against Trump because it's not going to be Bernie against Trump. It's going to be Bernie running as an independent because the Democrats won't let him win their primary. It's going to be some stooge Democrat, and it's going to be Trump. And who do you think is going to win out of the three of them? Well, the conservatives are more or less united. And Bernie's going to have a lot of love. I mean, I'm wearing my Bernie shirt here. But I don't know that Bernie, a Democrat, and Trump yields Bernie victorious in that. And I don't know that it's a good idea for us to continue waiting. Because what's that, another 2 years? 2.5 years before we get elected? 3.5 years before we actually get something done, assuming he can get something done in Congress? I don't think anything can get done legislatively anyway. I think by running for office, you can be a point person and you can motivate people and you can influence people. That's where the true power comes in, is influencing people, not necessarily legislatively, at least not in this point, because people can't talk to each other. So when you engage with people, especially with the left, my side, really be conscious of this hope. I see some people, some people did win. I did see some, there was a Green that won state assembly. That was awesome. But be conscious of hope. And a lot of, when you're talking with the progressive and it's almost like maybe they're not making sense and they're trying to appeal to your heart, try and recognize that. And especially, it's a hard online, but when I criticize Bernie, or I criticize progressives, or I criticize socialism, the reaction is like, oh, don't you have hope? It's like you're killing their hope. And I'm not hopeless. I am full of hope. I am super optimistic about our future. I just don't know how long it's going to take for this side to realize that they cannot get government to work, or at least not as they're doing it now. And they either have to change to figure out how to get government to work, or they're going to have to come up with a new solution. My solution is the cooperative economy and have people cooperating, but we all need to start listening to each other. And that's really the key. So if someone comes to you and says, hey, MMT is the solution, or if you're trying to push that on someone and they're not really interested, maybe not push, try to see what their bigger priority is. Because maybe they don't see MMT as the solution, or maybe they don't see single payer as a solution, or maybe they don't even see government as the solution. But we're all people here. We're all on this planet, and there's really no place to run. Like, I could go and buy some land and live off the land for another decade or so until the next nuclear war comes or something. But there's no place to run on this planet, not even if you're a billionaire, because eventually at some point, this unsustainable system that we're on is going to come to an end. And we all see it coming. And everyone thinks, yes, we all need to listen. Yes, we all need to change. But as the cliche goes, the change starts with you. And right now, I believe that the progressives, the left, are the ones that have the power, because they're the ones that need to change. And they're the ones that need to look in the mirror and say, okay, if what I'm pursuing isn't that hopeful, I should look into something else. I'm not saying stop pursuing single payer, or stop pursuing Medicare, or stop pursuing Greens or progressives. I'm saying take a step back and say, well, here's this, but also here's this, and maybe here's this. And let's try different things. Let's listen to each other. I'm not saying you have to accept Republicans. Like, just because the Democrats are wrong doesn't mean the Republicans are right. Far from it. It doesn't have to be a left-right. It doesn't even have to be 2D. It could be 3D, 4D. Human beings are complex. So let's start listening to each other. And us on the left, let's stop with this nonsense that we progressives can influence the Democratic Party, who has way more money and influence over their party than we do. If you want to try, keep going. I absolutely recommend keep trying. Just don't put all your eggs in that basket. And if someone comes along and they have a solution that hurts you because you're like, oh my God, you're going to hurt my chance as a progressive. Just like Danielle went through in this. Here's I think this is 49. Yeah, so here it is, like all the people who aren't on a major party at the bottom, yet everyone's sick of the major parties. Everybody's sick of the major parties. And we have to accept that there's going to be enough people who don't pay attention, who aren't online, like this woman here who won against Steve Cox with 15 followers, and Steve Cox has 15,000 or something like that, and he's talking with all sorts of people and having the difficult conversations, doing what needs to be done. We have to accept what's working and what's not working. And we have to be smart about that. Mind, body, and soul. The left can't just have the body, the heart, the feeling. We can't just stand up for the little guy, because long term that's not going to work. And you can't just have the mind that conservatives have that say, well, my life is like a 100-yard dash, and even if there's problems and obstacles, God says I need to run really hard and I'm going to live my life. That's admirable. And that's great for you, but it's not working for all of us. Mind, body, and soul. So we have to take what the left is saying and what the right is saying and see what our best option is forward. And I say we start with a group that, at least in my experience, has been the only one that's been listening. That's what I got. Thanks for watching. People hate the two parties, but yeah, you will. You're so right. How do we stop that? That's the funny thing. I don't know that we can stop it through voting, because like this whole piece here. Let me go back to, because the whole problem that we're having with voting is that there's no competition. The only competition is conservatives have theirs and progressives have theirs. And that's not competition, because progressives need their own competition and conservatives need their own competition. And primaries, democracy, and voting aren't cutting it. Like, we have no competition. It's like, who the hell is Diane Harkley? I mean, Mike Levin, I only know him because he said you're either with Trump or you're with California. And it's like, I can't believe how much, it couldn't be any more literally divisive than that. So how do we stop it? We have to start talking to each other and come up with a plan. My plan is the cooperative economy, because I don't think government can solve the problems. But that's a hard pill for people to swallow. It's too big of a leap, and people feel like there has to be some massive shift. And it's a massive mental shift once people start doing it, but it's actually a simple shift. And it's like the internet, you have to have enough people logging on for it to make sense. Because if you just have a few people gardening and sharing with the world how they garden, it's not going to help. It's like the internet early on. You only had education sites and porn. So third parties and no party are slowly growing. Yeah, I like the concept of the third party, but here's the thing. The system itself is meant to prevent change. And it's like all the people who you need to get attention from aren't listening because they know politics is bullshit. And they know, like, they just don't want to, they're like, well, Democrats aren't as bad as Republicans, so I'm just going to vote for them. And if they engage in politics, if you go online, you engage in politics, you get the shit beat out of you. So it's like people are just tired and beaten down. And a third party would be great, but it's hard to get, the third parties seem to face the same problem that our revolution is facing and that progressives face, is that when you're trying to help the people at the bottom, there's no money in it. Shocking. And the middle class, they're hurting too. So they're not really trying to upset the whole apple cart, which the people at the bottom are all willing to upset the apple cart because they don't really have anything going anyway. So if there can be a third party, some of the people I communicate with, multiple people I'm communicating with have tried to start a third party or are working on it. And if you can, that's great. Again, don't put all your eggs in one basket. And I think that when you look at the whole democracy as a whole, how you use democracy to force someone else to do something. Like if you're in a small club, the club can't agree, so you vote on it. And that vote's not based on deliberation. Vote is based on how well someone can present themselves, is really what it comes down to. And for democracy in politics, that vote is based on how much money people have and how many signs they can put up and how many ads they can stuff in your mailbox. And that's not a good way. I mean, that's not a good way for people to have their voice heard. And that to me is the biggest problem. It's like I'm all in favor of a third party can get it done. I'm not optimistic. It's certainly seeing how the Green Party operates. Anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. This was a fun one to do because I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated much with the vote recently because I wasn't expecting to win. I wasn't even on the ballot this time, but I wasn't expecting to win. I wasn't expecting that a lot of progressives would do that well because the system is kind of working against them. And my biggest hope is that people can start to take that disappointment instead of just turning, this is mostly progressives, instead of just turning around and saying, yes, I'm going to try harder this time, I'm going to canvass harder and do all these things that just aren't working. And we need to stop doing things that aren't working. I'm not saying lose all hope. I'm saying be honest with yourself when things are hopeless because there are other alternatives. All right. Thanks, everybody. See you soon.